6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Our communities deserve better than this budget. Scottish Labour cannot support an austerity budget that inflicts cuts on public services while delivering tax cuts to the wealthiest in our society. Instead, Scottish Labour want a budget that will help lift people out of poverty and help build stronger communities with well-resourced public services. We asked the Scottish Government to include our anti-poverty policies in the budget, but they declined. The result is a budget that is a total disappointment from a government that claims to be progressive and ambitious for Scotland.
Derek Mackay.
And as fair of a Finance Secretary, I asked the Labour Party how they would pay for it. I got no answers. Can Monica Lennon tell us here and now, beyond the top rate of tax, what would any other rate of tax be under a Labour government to fund those policies? Last chance, explain your position.
Monica Lennon.
I think the Cabinet Secretary should be on his last chance, because that is simply not true. That is simply not true. And James Kelly and Scottish Labour colleagues entered discussions in good faith, and we got nothing out of this Cabinet Secretary. And what the Cabinet Secretary failed to talk about, if he cares to listen, what the Cabinet Secretary failed to talk about at all was child poverty. At the front of our minds, when we went into discussion, were the 1 in 4 children in Scotland who are living in poverty. Frontbenchers think it's funny, but 1 in 4 children in Scotland are living in poverty.
Excuse me, Ms Lennon. Ms Campbell, would you please stop shouting? Thank you. Ms Lennon.
Perhaps the Cabinet Secretary for Communities agrees with Scottish Labour, because when we asked for a £5 child benefit top-up, there was clear evidence that that would lift 30,000 children out of poverty, a policy that has wide support in Scotland from charities and trade unions alike. No, I'm going to make some progress, because Derek Mackay said no to that. Aileen Campbell maybe already knows the answer. And that's part of the budget that we could have had. Even the SNP's own highly respected former Special Advisor Kevin Pringle described this as a missed opportunity. Scottish Labour is sick of seeing our public services and workers struggle. We ask for more funding for public services because when they are properly resourced, all of our communities are stronger for it. Instead, shamefully, this SNP budget will cut council budgets in real terms by £230 million, taking total cuts. No, it's not wrong, Cabinet Secretary. Taking total cuts since 2011 to £1.5 billion. Derek Mackay spins these cuts as efficiencies, but let's make no mistake, these are devastating cuts that put lifeline services at risk. And every single MSP in this chamber knows that to be true. And on tax, as James Kelly outlined, Scotland's tax bands require progressive and fair brackets. Labour would make the richest pay their fair share. But the SNP tax plans are weak, rewarding higher earners with tax cuts. And on rail, as Colin Smith said earlier, we are proposing a fare freeze because we are listening to the people of Scotland who have made their voices heard about poor rail services, overcrowded trains and the unaffordable hike in fare costs. But again, the Scottish Government isn't listening. Rail fares have increased while ScotRail's performance has plummeted. Another missed opportunity to do something about the cost of living. And look at the big picture, the big challenges that Scotland faces. Audit Scotland warns that the future of our NHS is not sustainable. We are not seeing the transformational change needed to reform and integrate health and social care. The Government needs to be transparent about the funding our NHS actually needs. Chronic underfunding has pushed health boards to crisis. The Health Secretary's own board, NHS Ayrshire and Arran, has been underfunded for years and faces cuts of over £40 million next year. Surely the Health Secretary believes her own constituents deserve better than that.
Derek Mackay.
Can I thank Monica Lennon for allowing me to make the intervention? Can Monica Lennon then explain why she'll be voting against an increase in the NHS budget of over £700 million tonight? And if she wants even more money for public services, by how much would tax have to be increased to pay for Labour's demands?
Monica Lennon.
Presiding officer, this budget is weak. It is not tackling the challenges that are underlying, because it's not simply about more money for the NHS. Let's look at the facts. Life expectancy has stalled. The death rates have begun to rise for people who live in our poorest communities. Health inequalities in Scotland are worsening. Cuts to council services are shutting doors on the most vulnerable people in our community. So that's not helping Cabinet Secretary. The Cabinet Secretary has dismissed Labour's progressive policies from the outset. And perhaps again he should have listened to former adviser Kevin Pringle, because he was right when he said poor people die younger, but the poverty that kills them lives on. The levels of poverty in Scotland are unacceptable. Our poverty-proofed proposals for the budget would have saved lives, because when we have policies that tackle poverty, we tackle the causes of ill health, and that's the issues that matter in this budget, or should have mattered to this government.